do think it is the bottom, but here's what has to finish. We need the rest of the pieces, or the rest of the pine cones, to fall off the tree. There's many forced liquidations coming in the next 10 days. I would argue the time to reposition, and this is a really interesting conversation I had with our auditors yesterday over the weekend. We are obviously going to be taking this as a write-off, and it's a tax loss. There's no question about that. We're not going to reestablish our positions until 31 days later, because this is the first year where the IRS and other regulators, tax regulators around the world, are treating this asset in the same way they treat stocks. So I would think there'll be a lot of selling between now and maybe mid-December, December 15th. I will be reestablishing positions. But I'll tell you something else. What we're going to need here is to take the simplest act, and that is the transparency around the Stablecoin Act. Get that signed. That has nothing to do with Bitcoin or any other token, but it does signal that the regulator is now looking at payment systems like USDC. That will be very positive for the crypto market, and I anticipate that will happen in the next few months. And that's because the midterms are over. The House is controlled by Republicans. That's what it looks like, and they're more positive on getting this done. I could be happier, there's no question, but I must tell you, I've made bad investments. I've made good investments. Some work out, some don't. This is a bad investment. It's not my first. It won't be my last, but luckily I make more good investments than bad ones. So you have to deal with reality. You made a good point that I learned a long time ago as an investor. So I don't take concentrated institutional risk. My holdings are in many different locations for exactly this reason. So, and that is, if you're a fiduciary for an operating company, as I am, you do that just out of habit, because you never know what's going to happen to any one institution at any one time. And that is our situation with FTX. However, we took a huge hit. I'm a shareholder, was a shareholder of FTX International, a shareholder of FTX US. We had multiple accounts on the FTX platform, which are completely locked out now. They have zero balances. I've talked to many other institutional investors that use the platform. They also have zero balances. Obviously, everybody's talking to their accountants and lawyers and auditors and compliance departments. It's an extraordinary situation. But at the same time, if it has a silver lining, what I think it's going to be is, I was just yesterday at the governor's convention in Orlando talking to lawmakers. The amount of pressure regulators are getting today about this situation is extreme. It's the number one issue now in financial services. So these bills, like the Transparency Act for stablecoins and the Digital Commodity Act, which have been, sitting around, floating around forever and not moving forward for whatever reason you can speculate, are now getting new focus. And we're going to have to push some regulation. In the meantime, I'm moving my assets off all unregulated exchanges, and we're putting them in Canada, where we can find a regulated exchange, a company called BitBuy, public, and the name of the company is WonderFi, that trades there. So we bought shares, we own a piece of the company, and so that gives us access to, the statements the company's making. In addition, it's regulated by the OSC, which is the equivalent of the SEC, the Ontario Securities Commission. There is no commingling of accounts. The assets cannot be lent out. They are scrutinized by the regulator. Proof of assets scrutinized by the regulator. So that's what we're doing. We're moving it all there. We can't move forward without regulation. And we've been stalled out as the various regulators fight the turf wars over who should regulate what. For example, should stablecoin be regulated by the Fed that oversees currency, or should it be regulated by the SEC? Or should it be regulated by the agency that does payment systems? While they fight, there's no regulation, and we can't advance. I feel terrible for all the retail investors that got wiped out here, but this whole industry can't advance as it should without regulation, because we can't attract sovereign wealth and pension to it. They refuse to invest because they have no platform to do it on a compliant basis. And they're certainly not going to invest on an unregulated rogue platform. I don't pick any one of them. These unregulated platforms are never going to get institutional capital after what's happened here, ever. Not now, not ever. So the whole point is we need this regulation. In addition, crypto's not going away. It's too productive. It's too useful. It provides a lot of services with transparency and lower cost than the existing systems do today. And I'm talking about whether you want ACH or a SWIFT transfer or a Fed wire. These things are really old and inefficient and very expensive. Just on payment systems alone, I'd like to use a stable coin for my businesses, and I intend to do that as soon as the regulations pass. Now, along with others, I'm not the only one, I'm going to be spending a lot more time in Washington really firing up my voice on getting this regulation through. I'm not the only person that's going to be doing this. I'm tired of waiting for it. I think we're very, very inefficient, and it's time to move. And this onion that's being unpeeled is going to get much worse by the time this is over. The amount of hedge funds, you just detailed one of them. There are countless others that are going to go to zero. So this is going to have a very, very powerful impact in terms of loss of capital. I've met Sam multiple times. I talked to him last Thursday, actually, when this thing was, boiling over, trying to get the actual amount he was trying to raise, because there was a lot of interest in institutional and sovereign wealth at the time in buying a piece of FTX before all the regulation, before the whole thing collapsed. But his parents, I mean, you've never met nicer people than that. Sam, if 9 out of 10 people I talked to that have met him don't think he has an evil bone in his body. The guy was a really interesting guy. Now, look, he's going to have to suffer the slings and arrows, but I still like the guy. I feel very sorry for him, but he's a good person. And at the end of the day, he got himself in a bad place. But let me walk you through last Thursday so that your viewers, you and I both understand this. Thursday morning last week, when it was becoming clear that there was a $6 to $8 billion hole on the balance sheet and that ownership of FTX was on the table. It was clear from the CZ tweets and his communications that he was looking to buy 100% of FTX. Well, that woke up a lot of sovereign wealth and agents for sovereign wealth funds, because $8 billion is a rounding error in a sovereign wealth fund. And often times in financial services, when there's collapse and blood in the streets, are some of the best investment opportunities. So I put a message into FTX because you are right. I was a paid spokesperson for them and an investor, and I knew the management. And a few minutes later, Sam called me back at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the only reason I put that call in was to confirm, which number is it you're looking for? Is it 6 billion or 8 billion? He confirmed to me in a very rational conversation. It was short but rational. The number was 8 billion. I got back on the phone with all of the institutions that I work for in the indexing business that were asking me, what's the number? What are the terms? What's the number? While that conversation was happening, by around 3 in the afternoon, that interview with Gensler at the SEC started to circulate worldwide. And it was clear that he was bringing out a very hard hammer onto this situation. The minute that happened, every sovereign wealth fund backed off because they can't go offside with the SEC. They put most of their assets in the S&P 500. So after multiple phone calls back and forth, and the time zone was 12 hours to some of these countries, that was over. There was no option. I left a message for Sam saying that conduit is closed because of what's going on with the regulator in the US. I think we can all admit, you can love him or hate him given what's happened, but he was one of the most brilliant traders in the crypto universe. He also built one of the most robust platforms. We used FTX actively. It was a very robust platform that allowed us to get information on a compliant basis. So I really like what he built.
Would you back him?
Yes. And I'll tell you how I would do it. I would do it in a different context. He would not have operational control of the assets. He would have trading control. And you're going to find, assuming he doesn't get involved in a bad situation somehow personally, that he will be found somewhere else in crypto. I know all the players in the crypto market, and I'm just telling you, there's nobody quite like him. Transparent, I'm honest.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, Sam Bankman-Fried is an unusual 1% person in terms of understanding how these assets work. And if I could put him on my team in a very straight vertical where he doesn't have the ability to move assets around, but has the ability to trade them, yeah, I would. All of the institutions, including me, have hired various law firms over the weekend. I need to see the trading agreements. I will see them. I'll see the agreements between FTX and Alameda and other outside entities. We don't know what those agreements are because most people, you got to remember something. FTX and Sam were Americans, and a lot of people took comfort in that, including the largest financial institutions in the world. The cap table beside me as investors, there's none like it. I mean, The largest financial global institutions in the world were very comfortable to invest in FTX at a 32 billion valuation. Yes, we have egg on our faces, but we met the team, we met the parents, we met Sam, and for all the negative things being said about him, I don't know of a more productive and efficient and disciplined, for a while anyways, trader of crypto. And I got to tell you something, there are very few that could do what he did. And look, does he end up in jail? No idea. Was he brilliant? Was he in the 1%? Yes, he was. And he still is. So I rest my case, Your Honor. We'll have to see where this goes.